Welcome to the guide on VE tuning. So we'll go over what VE is. It stands for volumetric efficiency. It's based on atmosphere, 100 being the maximum efficiency of the engine. You can exceed this because the calculations are going to come from injector data, so changing the flow rate will increase the number to numbers you can see above 100. It's going to use RPM and MAP as the inputs. There's some benefits, pros and cons to this. We'll see that in a second. Probably wondering when you need to do this is anytime you've changed any of these parts or made any major modifications to airflow. So it would include also advancing or retarding your cam, because it will change your compression. Speed density, pros and cons here. As I mentioned, there are some good things about this. It's a straightforward direct fueling method. That is probably the best thing about it. We'll get into the tune here in a sec. Step one, obviously, if you haven't done this already, we're going to go ahead and back up the stock tune. So save this in a safe place, lock it up, put it on a thumb drive, whatever you got to do. Change the file name. Something along those lines, get the idea, and save it. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and disable the MAF. So go to Engine Diagnostics. We're going to click on Airflow. We're going to go to MAP Airflow Sensor. We're going to go ahead and set this to 0. Now we're going to head over to the DTC tab. We're going to disable P101, 102, and 103, or set them to mill on first air, and disable the light. This you can leave on if you want to know it's failed. However, I prefer to go ahead and disable it so I know if anything else fails while I'm tuning. Next thing we're going to do is going to go ahead and multiply our VE table by 1.15, which is 15%. So we're going to go to Engine, we're going to go to the Airflow tab, General, Main VE, Primary. Open the table. We're going to highlight the entire table, multiply it by 15%. This is going to depend on mods that were made, but this is a good safe starting percentage to add some fuel. If you're doing this because you've changed the cam or mods, this is a good way to keep your engine on the richer side while you're tuning the VE. Not a bad route. If you have a big cam, you may notice that reducing fuel in these areas here will actually help with your idling if you're having issues. But starting the whole table with 15% is not a bad way to start. Next, we're going to go ahead and disable all fuel trims. Any adders that add to the VE, we want to go ahead and turn off, and we'll start with the long-term and short-term fuel trims. So we're going to select the engine, we're going to select the fuel tab here, then we're going to go ahead and head over to open and close loop. Click on this, and as you see, you get long-term fuel trims are enabled. We're going to go ahead and disable these, and as a backup, we're going to highlight the min ECT and set that to 284. We're going to move over to closed loop and disable this. And highlight the entire table by clicking the top left box here. In the box on top, you enter 284 and hit the equal sign. That will disable closed loop. Over on the left, we see short-term fuel trims are automatically disabled by default, so not turning these on is usually how to get started on tuning the VE with a wideband. Next, we're going to go ahead and disable the decel field cutoff because we don't want that to affect our VE numbers while we're tuning. So we're going to go to Engine, I'm going to go to Fuel, we're going to go over to the Cutoff DFCO tab, click on this, and right underneath it you'll have deceleration fuel cutoff. We want to go ahead and turn this off, setting 284 under enable temp. That way it does not cut fuel when anytime you let up on the throttle. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and disable the cat over temp protection because it is another adder. We can come over here to Fuel tab again. We will go over to COT, Lean Cruise. Click on this, and you'll see cat over temp protection. We'll turn this off. And now keep in mind this can damage your cats if you run the engine lean too long. So if you're running rich already, it shouldn't be an issue. But this can actually add fuel to your VE table and can play with your numbers. So that's why we turn it off. But definitely keep an eye on the wideband and make sure you're not running too lean. Okay, next thing we're going to do is go ahead and set our equivalence ratio to 1 across the board to get an accurate baseline of our VE table. So we're going to click on the engine tab, we're going to click on fuel tab, we're going to come back to open and close loop. Realistically, you could have done this earlier, but we're just going to do it now. We hit the open and close loop EQ ratio table, open it. We could set this above operating temp. We could do that and set it to 1 here. Or we could just go ahead and select the entire table, hit 1 at the top, just enter 1, hit the equal sign. Entire table is now set to 1. 1.0 equivalence ratio, which will make no changes. We're adding any fuel regardless of temp and map reading, which is exactly what we want to have happen because we're trying to set a baseline on our VE. It's the whole point of this. Okay, next we need to copy our high octane table to the low octane table on our ignition or under spark. We're going to go to engine, we're going to come over to spark, and see under advance you'll see main spark advance here. So we're going to go ahead and open the high octane table. We're going to click the left corner again, select the entire table, right click, copy. We'll close this out. We'll open the low octane table. We'll click the box again on the top left. This time we're going to go ahead and hit paste. And now our high octane table is now the low octane table. The reason we do this is because when the MAF has failed, the PCM will automatically revert to the low octane table. So in order to tune this as if you're going to go back to the MAF later on, you can go back to using the low octane and high octane. But if you're going to stay in speed density, this becomes your primary spark table right here. Okay, the last thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and adjust our power enrichment settings to be built into the VE table. We're going to go ahead and click on engine. We're going to go back to fuel, and we're going to get power enrichment here. The idea behind this is to get fuel into the engine when you're under high loads. How it works is under PE throttle pedal, you have a hot and a cold table, but if you look underneath, it has to exceed this temperature to hit the hot table. So that's why we're going to just click on the cold table, because that's the only one that is enabled. We can enable the hot, but there's no need. So we go here, and you see along the top you have your RPM, and along the bottom you have your throttle position sensor percentage required. So let's say, for example, at 3600 RPM, you need 60% throttle to enter power enrichment. Now this is minus any delays that may be applied, and in the stock tune here is a 0-second delay. If there is something here, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and turn that off. It's a good idea to get into power enrichment sooner than later, especially with higher horsepower builds. This is solely up to you on how you want to set this up, but it's a good idea to go ahead and bump it up on higher horsepower engines that are going to be under more stress. More fuel will not hurt you, it'll just hurt the environment. It won't hurt your engine. So we'll go ahead and adjust this as needed. That way that power enrichment gets built into your VE table. Close that out, and we'll come over to EQ ratio and check on this. How this works, if you look at the example at the bottom, you'll see a 14.7 ratio, or 1 to 1.1 divided by 1.1 equals 13.36 air fuel ratio, or the target. So if you want to set this up, usually what we set it to is we go ahead and set it to 12.5 ratio. In order to get that number, it's fairly simple. Nice little trick here is you can go ahead and take your EQ ratio or your stoic ratio, which on this car in stock is typically 14.63. We'll divide that by what we want. So for an NA build, you're going to want 12.5 ratio under Power Enrichment. So we're going to hit that, and we're going to get a number, and we got 1.17. We can copy this over here, enter, and then we can select the whole table and set it to 1.17. Now that will give us a 12.5 ratio when we are under Power Enrichment. If you have Boost, there will be a separate table up here, and it'll be called Boost Enrichment. And on that table, you want to set that for 11.5 to 1. Okay, now that we have everything set up in the tune, we're ready to set up the scanner. So we're going to save this file, and hit Save As we're always going to do from here on out. Save As. I'm going to go ahead and click and save over this VE tuning because this is, I've already done this, so I'm just going to save this over that. So now I have a fresh tune file ready to go. I go ahead and write this into the car at this time. I'd write it, and then I set up a scanner. So we'll move on over to the scanner. And as we see here, I have the SAE defaults loaded on the left. You'll notice a lot of things are grayed out on the inputs list. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and load the vehicle defaults instead of SAE defaults. Go down here and you'll see load vehicle defaults. This will be based on your car and what it normally will display here. Now you see nothing's grayed out, so all these inputs actually work. However, this is not an all-inclusive list, so we will have to add some things to this list to ensure we have the appropriate information to log for, and then a little bit more because there's a few other things we're going to want to look at while we're tuning. Okay, I went ahead and separated all of these inputs from the list, drug them to the bottom to make it a little more visually appealing. So here we have our air fuel ratio commanded, our engine RPM, our intake manifold absolute pressure, aka your map. So these three things are already present, so we are still missing one input that we need to do to add to tune the VE table. So that would be your wideband. So in order to add this, we'll just go ahead and either right click and we can hit add channel, or you can use the gear on top. Either way is the same thing. Add channel. On the very bottom you'll see external inputs. Under MPVI Pro, we're going to open this, and here we have MPVI input 1. So if you've got it wired into input 1, which I believe is the top pin on your green plug, we're going to go ahead and select this, and it adds that input into the scanner. However, it doesn't know what that is, so we're going to have to tell it what that is. We'll close this out, we'll right click this, and we're going to click transform. So we hit that, we'll see oxygen sensors at the top, we'll see air fuel ratio here. So we go ahead and open this, and you select the one, whichever wideband you're using. Hopefully it's on this list, and some of them might not be, but they should come with instructions on how to add this in. It's a little more complicated and involved, but in my case I have an AEM 30 dash all this stuff. This input works fine for me, so I'll go ahead and add that, and now I'm good to go and ready to log for VE. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is actually build a table so we can log the error between the wideband and the air fuel ratio commanded. So in order to do this, we'll come over to your graphs or your histograms. We'll right click, we can hit graphs layout, click that, and we hit the little plus sign on top to add graph. So we'll click on this, we'll add a table, and under this table we're going to go ahead and hit the parameter. So this parameter is going to be our AFR error. That's what we're looking at. That's what we want to log along the chart. So we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. We're going to see maths, and we're going to go here. I'm going to click under lambda and AFR. So we're going to open this, and we can look at the AFR error. We're going to select that. I'm going to add an AFR error on the math. Now you can rename it whatever you want. So we go VE AFR error is something like that. Name it whatever you want, but something you know what the table is. Now we can go ahead and leave it in percent. Decimals we can select, we'll go ahead and select 2. filtering, you don't need to add a filter to this. Cell hits required. We go ahead and make this 50 because we want at least 50 hits before logging any type of percent or error. You can put this higher or lower if you'd like, but really 50 is a good solid number to use. For the shading, to give it nice colors, make it a little more visual, we'll put a high value of 30, and we'll select the color and we'll make that red. This will indicate lean. And on the low value, we'll go -30, and we'll select green because it's rich. So now we have those two selected. Now down here on the column axis, which will be the top of the chart up here, so we'll go ahead and select the column axis. We need to log this along and match the actual table in the tune. So we're going to open the tune. We'll go to Engine. We'll go to Airflow. Go to General tab under Airflow, and we'll select the main VE table. And as we see on the top, that's going to be RPM. So while we're here, we need to get these numbers for our RPM. So we'll go back to the scanner real quick. Now we know we need to add RPM here. So we'll go ahead and just type it in on the top, RPM, and we'll get our general. We'll select any of these. Engine RPM SAE is fine. Double click, because this is going to pop up and it's going to ask us if we want to use the generic sensor, and yes we do. So we'll hit yes. Typically just hit yes on that and it'll work fine. For the values, we need to go back to the table in the tune. We'll click the top left box here, the little corner. We'll right click it. We're going to hit column axis. We're going to hit copy labels. We're going to go back to the scanner. We're going to enter those values here. We'll just right click again and paste it. And now we have numbers along the top. Now we need the row. So we'll go back to here, and we'll see that we need manifold absolute pressure, or KPA. So we'll go back to the scanner, and add our map input. So here we go, intake manifold. As we see it down here, that's the input. So we'll just start typing that in. Intake manifold. And we'll see it right here, our absolute pressure. We can double click that, and again, yes, sounds good. So we'll add that. So now we have the manifold absolute pressure sensor, the map, and the values we need to add as well. So we'll go back to the tune. We'll right click the top left box again, and we'll hit row axis, copy labels. We'll head back over to the scanner, enter those in the values by pasting them in, and we're done. Now we have a VE-AFR error, but we'll plot the error percent along these two axes, and using our wideband, we'll plot that error versus commanded. So now that we have our VE table error set up, we're going to go ahead and add a few other inputs. As you see on top here, we have our spark advance, which is extremely important to log, as well as your spark retard, otherwise known as knock retard. Now this is automatically going to be logged, knock retard. However, if you click on either one of them, you'll see along the row axis you have cylinder air mass, and over here there is no cylinder air mass being logged. So we're going to go ahead and have to add that, just in case we do get knock retard. We want to actually know where it is. So we're going to go ahead and hit the gear at the top. Start with that one. We'll add cylinder. Just type in cylinder, and it should pop right up. You have right under here airflow, cylinder air mass. We'll add this. And in addition to that, we're going to want to add a couple other things. We dynamic air, we want to track that because that's kind of what the VE is dealing with. This number will change slightly depending on what our VE settings are. So we're going to go ahead and add that as well, and it can help diagnose some other issues. So you just want to go ahead and log this. So we'll add dynamic airflow. Now one last thing we're going to add is injector flow rate, or not flow rate, but we're going to go ahead and add injector, which is actually going to be INJ, and it's going to be pulse width. As you see, it pops up right here, injector pulse width. You can either do it that way, or just type in pulse. You get it that way too. So we're looking at injector pulse with both banks. We're going to want to go ahead and keep an eye on that as well. This will let you know, and if later you need to check to see if your injectors are large enough, there's some math you can plug in and make this into something useful, and seeing how, and build a chart to see exactly where your injectors are maxing out. So we go ahead and log these parameters here, and that's pretty much a standard across the board as far as what we want to look at while we're logging and tuning our cars. And here's our nice new PE AFR error table, and that we just made, and we'll be able to use this shortly. That should pretty much it for what you need to set up on the scanner. Okay, so this is an old log I'm going to go ahead and play to show kind of how this is going to look while you're driving. Right here we're showing a lot of rich areas, which is fine. This is a 427 stroker and a 98 Camaro, so this is what you're seeing here. I was driving around, it's a lot colder than the day I tuned it, so as another thing, the speed density will actually cause that with the weather changes and stuff, so you can kind of predict this a little bit. But as you see, it's nice and smooth throttle applications. You're moving this around. I wasn't actually tuning for VE, however the parameters were being logged, so this chart does work just fine and will tell me exactly what is present. So this does need another VE tune. This was just a test drive after some other maintenance, but you can see how this works. So these numbers we can use. So what we're going to do, we'll just go ahead and pause it here. Now normally you'd go to the end of the log, but these aren't going to change. This is the average. We're going to go ahead and make sure we're on the average. If you get the plus sign, you'll see that your highest numbers are logged here. But if you hit the minus, you'll also see the most negative, that was red. But we want to use the average. So we'll click on this, average. We'll go ahead and make sure the chart is all the way over to the left, as far as possible. Now, I'm going to take a look around on the rest of the chart. So we do have a number way down here that we probably don't want to actually change, because this is obviously the engine was off. So the wideband was just kept logging, and it stayed extremely rich for some time. So we'll go ahead and we're not going to copy that. So we start in the top left block, and we're just going to scroll around across. This is one way to do this. And we select all the cells. I just wanted to leave that one out for this particular occasion. However, you can also click the top left box, just like in the tune. You can click that and it'll select the entire table as well. But make sure that you're all the way maxed out left and up before you do this, because for some reason sometimes if you do it like this and you copy it, it will actually go from the 35 line. So make sure it's all the way up like this when you copy. And you go ahead and copy. Go back to the tune. We're going to open our VE table. So this is how we're going to actually adjust it. Hit the airflow, general, VE. And we can go to the top left corner. We can right click here, and we're going to hit paste special. We can go ahead and hit multiply by percent. So if we hit that, we see how the changes were made over here, and if we click off, you'll see how many where it actually changed. This number I can go ahead and just I'm going to interpolate these again, because I know that one isn't correct. So I'm just do that and it goes away. But we look at the rest of it, and we go ahead and take a look at the chart and the graph over here. I'll max this out, and we can see where the changes were made to our VE. So we can see we got very, very rich up here. So it pulled a lot of fuel out. So what basically this is happening right now is that this thing is reshaping. Now you can leave it like this for first few logs, but you don't want to let it get too crazy out of control. But take a few more logs, put some more information in here, and after that it's time to go ahead and start smoothing it. To smooth this out, you don't want to just grab the whole chart and smooth the entire thing, because that will actually reduce the shape of the chart. So what you want to do is go ahead and do that in certain areas. This is one technique. It's a fast way to do this. You can select blocks like up here, just highlight them and go across all the way, and then you can just hit smooth selection, go like a 3x3 or 3x4 or however you want to do it. The idea is to smooth this section, and it'll kind of bring some of that down and up in the same area. So I hit it like this. It'll kind of cancel out a little bit of the changes I made, but it won't be as drastic of a change, which is fine. So then I can do the same thing and keep smoothing kind of along the way. If you keep clicking this, it'll continue to smooth, but I prefer to just click it once or twice and just kind of smooth along like this in small areas. So I'm just kind of smoothing the chart back out, and that way I'm not making any major changes to what I just changed, because this should generally stay the same shape across. When you're all done, this will be nice and smooth. It should be a brand new shape, which is the whole point of doing this, is because this shape needs to change based on your new airflow needs, especially if you've done cam. So this will definitely change in shape generally. So we'll go ahead and smooth like that. And you know, a little bit of bumps isn't so bad, so it's not a big deal to have that. But as you see, I'm smoothing this out. You can see it pulling those adjustments back out, which is why you want to keep logging and get as much data as you can, so you can get more of an idea of what this is supposed to look like in the end. But that's pretty much the method and how we do this and how we get the VE tuned. And again, this isn't necessarily smooth, but that's fine because we're still adjusting. So we'll just go out and get a little more data. We'll take this and we'll write it back into the car and rinse and repeat. But you can take this as far as you want, but don't cancel out all your corrections. You just want to be tracking along a certain, you want to go ahead and track along a certain path, trying to get to that shape you're looking for. So that about wraps up the tuning process. I hope you guys enjoyed that and hope it was helpful. If you have questions, go ahead and leave them below in the comments or hit me up on ls1tech.com. Still just a general method. There are other ways out there. So again, if you got questions, don't forget to ask. And I'll see you out there.